You're listening to the Remso Republic.
Folks, welcome back to the program. As always, I'm your host of the Remso Republic, Remso W. Martinez. Welcome back for all our new listeners. And I don't know if producer Ryan can hear this, but I've been looking at the numbers. We are getting so many new listeners. It's crazy. I was perfectly fine with the old crew, the strong, the loyal, the guys that always tune in every week and every month and everything else. But the fact that we're growing so much, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. This is an absolute joy for myself and producer Ryan. We love having you here, and we hope you can keep up. I hope you, however, won't be too turned off by today's conversation. I've been trying to keep things lighthearted since the election. I've said that my New Year's resolution is going to be a little bit more cheery, be a little bit more optimistic. Life is good. Good things are happening every day. But sometimes you've got to come back and you've got to call things out for kind of what they are, especially when it's really just kind of putting a spike in the middle of the road and it's causing you to maneuver around it. And, some things you just can't maneuver around for a long time. Eventually, everything's going to start turning into a minefield, and it doesn't matter how good you are at moving around certain topics. When it becomes obvious, it's going to, be pretty obvious, and you've got to eventually encounter it. One of those things, for those of you that might not know, is Evan McMullin. Yeah, he was the guy I kind of rooted for in the general election after Ted and Gary disappointed me and everything else. And, I basically always kind of stuck to this. I mean, he was the last guy on there. He was the last person that sounded authentic. I was going to vote on, the principles of liberty and economic freedom and living in government. And, I believe that he was the candidate at the time. But, I say that word at the time for a very specific reason. People are not saints. We are all fallen creatures. And because of that, we're all up to make, not necessarily mistakes, but I will call them ill-advised decisions. For those of you that don't know, Evan McMullin, he's been kind of going around the last couple months to what he calls the moderate left. He's been going on and just, attacking Trump left and right and left and right and left and right. And don't get me wrong, if you want to attack the president on something, I mean, that's your prerogative, especially if he deserves to be called out. And no one was more vehemently anti-Trump than I am. I mean, someone called me the definition of anti-Trump at one point. But here's the thing. There's one thing to be anti-Trump, and then there's one thing to just be not objective at all. I think he's been doing an absolutely great job the last month or so. And whether it was his cabinet picks or some of the decisions he made regarding, for every new regulation you want to put in, you've got to take out two. Whether it was the nomination of Judge Neil Gorsuch, I mean, he's been doing good. And when he does good, celebrate. When he does bad, call him out. But so far, I mean, I'm okay. If he gives me a reason to vote for him in 2020, I'll do it. But Evan McMullin hasn't been doing that, and his new organization, Stand Up Republic, things are getting kind of ridiculous. But before I go on too much of a tangent, I want to go ahead and bring in our guest today, who will kind of, help me kind of shed some light on this, come to a clear understanding about things, whether it's what this whole just constantly be anti-Trump attitude is, and this whole concept of, we got to reach out to the moderate left, to the moderate Democrats. I mean, I'm just so tired of it. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you tonight someone you've probably seen on Facebook Live before or read some of his articles. He's the director of research at Conservative Review, Mr. Rob Eno. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, very good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, but Rob, I gotta be honest, I'm kind of confused. What's your take on this whole Stand Up Republic situation? I mean, am I just being incredibly hard on him, or is he making some good points? I mean, the whole thing seems incredibly disingenuous at this point.
Well, I'm one of those people that thought that no offense to you, thought that his whole campaign was disingenuous. He was somebody that was a staffer on Capitol Hill. He said he was a CIA agent, but they can neither, the problem with saying you're a CIA agent is nobody can ever confirm or deny, because that's the way that works. So, he had a resume that was wholly unqualified to be the president, never ran an organization, who really knows what he believes. He was the staffer for a congressman. I don't know why he ran in the first place. And this stand-up Republic thing is just, again, another way for him to stay relevant and probably run for, governor of Utah or the senator from Utah in the future. I think that's kind of what his whole presidential campaign was about and what this is about.
Yeah, because I kind of have a chip on my shoulder because I reached out to his campaign when they were just getting started, when no one knew, and for those that knew, no one cared. And I got some responses back saying, oh, yeah, we'd love to come on. I got in contact with one individual I won't name, but, they constantly go dark. I tried to help them here in Virginia, and we had a whole bunch of events set up with their Virginia volunteers, and they never showed up. They never communicated with us. And then when Stand Up Republic came up, and I'm like, okay, this is a conservative organization. They want to help keep Republicans accountable. That's cool. Reach out. Silence. It's been 3 months. And frankly, if they're not going to talk to me, that's fine, because I'm still going to talk about them, especially when I'm seeing this stupid, ridiculous behavior occur, especially amongst people that I consider good people that have the right intentions. But it's being channeled in a way where it's not necessarily being constructive, but it seems like we're doing the Democrats' work for them. Instead of actually talking about substance, all it is anti-Trump, anti-Trump, anti-Trump. And it's not good enough to be just anti-Trump.
Well, no, and that's the thing is I think that there are a lot of people that have, Trump derangement syndrome on the right and the left, mostly on the left, that he'll never do anything right. I didn't vote for anybody.
Really?
I blanked the election. I didn't want to vote for Trump. I wasn't going to vote for Hillary. I wasn't going to vote for Evan McMullin. I blanked the election. I didn't. The first time in my life in a presidential election, I didn't have somebody that I wanted to vote for. So I didn't vote for them. That's what my vote was. My vote was a non-vote. And, but Trump has done some good things. Now, he's done some bad things. Yesterday or last week, he got up in front of a bunch of sheriffs and, said that they were going to find this one person that wanted to reform civil asset forfeiture laws in the state of Texas and make her life, a problem and ruin her career. Well, civil asset forfeiture, and it's one of the things that, one of the few things that I'm, very upset with Senator Sessions on, who is Attorney General Sessions designate, and the election or the vote on that was happening as we tape this. But the civil asset forfeiture thing where a cop can drive up, you've got cash on you, you could have the cash for whatever reason, and you have every right to have cash, but they can just take it from you because they don't think you should have that much cash on you, is ridiculous. And it's something that needs to be reformed. And that's something that Donald Trump is not for. So when he's against liberty, when he's against, personal freedoms, I will stand up and talk against Trump. But he has done many conservative things. We need to put a wall on our border. He's for that. We need to make sure that people that come into this country aren't going to commit terrorism. He's for vetting. Those are the type of things that he has done very little so far that has given me pause. And even some of the stuff where you would think, I want to have some trouble with, a lot of the times he's doing it to be asymmetrical. There's a lot out there with people saying that he's crazy and he just talks to spout his mouth off. I think he's doing it to see what sort of reaction he gets. And it's very interesting.
Definitely. And Rob, we're going to go ahead and keep this conversation going, but first we're going to go ahead and hit our first commercial break. Folks, you're listening to the Remso Republic. Hang on tight. We'll be right back in a moment.
The voice of the Liberty Generation, Remso W. Martinez.
Take the show on the go by subscribing to the Remso Republic on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, and YouTube. Don't be left out.
Hey everyone, the Johnny Rocket Launchpad is Liberty. Each week we strive to bring you the best guests in talk radio. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad delivers weekly interviews of noteworthy politicians, experts, and activists. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad is bringing the party to the Libertarian Party and launching ideas in your direction. Check us out at JohnnyRocketLaunchpad.com. You can hear me, Kurt Nelson, and the beautiful Heather Nixon talk about the ideas of liberty, rock and roll.
Hey guys, Tim Preuss here, and I wanted to take a minute and invite you to stop over to PreussPodcast.com and give our show a listen. We've got in-depth commentary on the issues that matter to you.
These hookers, fucking whores, are out there.
These hookers, man, I tell you.
Yeah, that's like the most contact I've had with the hooker. Is
them yelling at you.
Yelling at me on Twitter.
We break down the most pressing issues of our time.
This large lady with like tight clothing on. Not appropriately linked tight clothing either.
And we get the most intelligent analysis from friends of ours like Jeffrey Tucker.
You pulled over engine trouble, and what happened? What happened? I don't know. Oh God!
Seriously though, we love putting on a show that both entertains and educates. We're growing, and we'd be thrilled if you joined us. Check out PreussPodcast.com for more. That's PREUSS podcast.com.
Make sure to visit libertarianwingmedia.com, where you can find articles written by libertarians all over the world on all of today's issues. Check out our podcast network with monthly and weekly podcasts. Check out our libertarian t-shirt store with t-shirts like Make Markets Free Again and Make Markets Not War. And you too can become an author at Libertarian Wing Media and write what you want when you want. Just email alexmerced@alexmerced.com. Thank you very much.
Folks, welcome back to the program. We're going to continue our conversation from earlier, but first we're going to go ahead and pivot. Rob, something I brought up earlier was the idea of the moderate Democrat. And it seems that, and I understand, Buckley called it like the three-legged conservative stool. It was the economic libertarians, the traditionalists, and the anti-communists. And when it came to the Democrats for the long haul, you had the labor sympathizers, who were the progressives, and you had the blue dog Democrats, and it was pretty much those two on the Democratic side. But it seems that the thing that really bothers me about McMullin, and I see this with a lot of Republicans that don't get out of the Beltway often, it's that they tend to check their conservative principles at the door because it's not necessarily politically expedient, and they just try and be like, I call them the concession-crats. It's like, one reason why I'm a libertarian is because I think that conservatives, they settle for a lot, and then they settle, and then they celebrate it, and then for libertarians, it's like, we'll never be happy, but at least we keep going. And for a lot of people, especially a lot of the folks that are giant McMullin and stand-up Republic fans, I mean, they're like, oh, well, we have to replace Obamacare with just something which isn't, Obamacare. Oh, we can't do that because that's too extreme, and we don't want to be extremists. We have to think about the larger constituency. We have to worry about the moderate Democrats. And, man, I don't know about you, but I don't believe that moderate Democrats are real.
They used to be. They're not anymore. The parties used to be groupings of people that would help each other get elected, and there were conservatives and liberals in both parties. I mean, think of it. Teddy Roosevelt, the father of progressivism, was a Republican. So there used to be, John F. Kennedy would most certainly be, a moderate Republican, if not a conservative today, based on his belief in supply side economics.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my favorite presidents is Grover Cleveland. So I know that they've existed at some parts.
Right. But right now, no, you're absolutely right. But back to your point on the Republicans that, they get rid of Obamacare and stuff. I'm going to let you in a little secret. Politicians say stuff to get elected with no reason to ever do what they say they're going to do.
Gasp! Really?
After they get elected, yeah. So, I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not making you feel, like I've bursted your bubble. But that I'm not surprised with this Obamacare thing. They want these issues so they can fire up the base to keep getting elected. with no intention of ever following through. And that's one of the things that I like about Donald Trump is he's going to make these people follow through. Donald Trump said he's going to get rid of Obamacare, so he's going to get rid of Obamacare, and he's going to take the Republican Party kicking and screaming with them. Donald Trump said he's going to build a wall, which Republicans have said they wanted to do, but never have gone to do it. They gave Bush the ability to do it. Bush didn't build a complete wall, and then Obama stopped it. But the authority is there. Donald Trump's going to build a double-layer fence, and it's going to be built. And he's going to find money to do it, and that's what he's going to do. But back to your point about moderate Democrats, I mean, look at the person that's supposed to be a moderate Democrat, right? And that's Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin's not a moderate Democrat. Joe Manchin acts like a moderate Democrat when he talks, but then he doesn't vote like one. He votes lockstep with his party. But he has to, act like it because he's in West Virginia, of which he is the only statewide elected Democrat left. West Virginia went from a predominantly Democratic state to a predominantly Republican state in like the past 12 years because they were always conservative, and there used to be conservative Democrats, but now there's no conservative Democrats. The National Democratic Party got rid of conservative Democrats. Now, there's some states where there are conservative Democrats left, and it's back to the old, you're in the Democratic Party because it's the party that helps you get elected. Massachusetts, where I'm from, there are a handful of moderate or conservative Democrats on both social and fiscal issues. There's one woman, Colleen Gary, up in Massachusetts, who's a state representative who comes from a district that votes Republican in everything but the state representative seat with like a 70% margin. But she votes the way that her constituents want her to vote. She votes like a Republican most of the time. And, she just has not seen fit to change her party. So there are in local areas in certain states, there are a few, but nationally, it's a myth. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got to give credit where it's due. I wish during the last 8 years, a majority of Republicans in the Senate and the House had the nerve that Democrats who are in the Senate and the House now have. Because if they showed that energy, when Ted Cruz and Rubio and Lee were one of the few people standing up to filibuster Obamacare and everything else, when Rand Paul was talking about the can you drone a Starbucks situation, if more and more Republicans acted like the Democrats are now, think of how much could have happened. And that's the thing. I think, Democrats, they never come to the middle. They're always like, oh, we'll come to the middle, but it's their middle. You have to meet them there. We saw this with the omnibus bill about a year ago when Paul Ryan, that was one of his first major, things to tackle as Speaker of the House. It seems like with Democrats, they never settle. Whereas Republicans, all you do is decrease deficit spending by like by 10% instead of 5% or something. And suddenly it's a giant thing worth celebrating. Instead of the debt ceiling, we're going to have the fiscal cliff. I mean, it's just renaming things. I just feel that Republicans, even now, I mean, so many people are like, what if the Democrats don't come to the table on this? It's like, come on. You have the House and the Senate, and Harry Reid gave you the nuclear option. It just seems that Republicans now are trying to constantly find ways not to actually be conservative on anything. And I'm not saying all. We've got one of my favorite congressmen, Tom Garrett, who's doing awesome, and Thomas Massey and so many others. But it just seems for the leadership, it's like they're still timid. It's like they don't know that they've won.
No, you're absolutely correct. The by and far, Republicans have won across the country. Now, in the popular vote, obviously, Donald Trump came in second, but, we don't elect presidents by the popular vote. We elect presidents by the Electoral College. That's how that happens. Everywhere outside of, my former state of Massachusetts and California and the metro New York area of the Northeast corridor, people want to see the things that Donald Trump campaigned on happen. And the Republicans have campaigned on them year after year after year. Now, remember, they said we can't get rid of Obamacare because even if we pass it, Barack Obama won't sign it. If you get rid of Obamacare tomorrow, Donald Trump will sign it. So you don't have that excuse. So they look for another excuse. They have almost a Stockholm syndrome where they want to be loved by the press. They want to be loved. They want to make sure that they still get to go to all the cocktail parties in D.C. You know, there was an interesting story. I remember back in, I think it was 2008, when I was the Young Republican National Committee man from Massachusetts. We went to D.C. for the Young Republican Leadership Conference. And Newt Gingrich got up and he talked about Bob Michaels. Now, Bob Michaels was probably the minority leader before you were born, but Bob Michaels was the minority leader back in the 1980s and right up until the 1994 Newt Gingrich Contract with America wave year. And Newt said something very, very true. Bob Michaels was, you know, he was a nice guy. He ran the party well, but he was more interested in making sure that he got that he could go to golfing outings with the Democrats and the lobbyists than he was about putting forth a Republican agenda and getting it through. That wasn't what Newt Gingrich was about. And then you had the Contract with America. They won. And Newt Gingrich forced Bill Clinton, you know, we're talking about moderate Democrats, to moderate. You know, Bill Clinton actually governed as a moderate Democrat because Bill Clinton wanted to be loved. He wanted a second term in 1996. So he co-opted the Republican agenda and worked with Newt Gingrich and passed welfare reform and all sorts of other things that Newt Gingrich did, which got us a balanced budget because Newt Gingrich and the Republicans in the 90s pushed to have that stuff happen. And the Republican Party has lost that lesson, that when they push for the things that the American people want and elect them to do, then they'll be fine and they'll keep voting for them. And, you know, it's up to conservatives to put pressure on those representatives and senators that don't vote that way and make their lives, you know, a little bit tough.
Definitely. So we're going to go ahead and keep this conversation going, but first we're going to go ahead and hit our final commercial break. Folks, hang on tight. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
We'll be back shortly.
Stay up to date with the latest news and updates by visiting
remzorepublic.com.
Make sure to subscribe to all the podcasts on the Libertarian Wing Media Podcast Network on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, such as the Alex Merced Cast, with interesting interviews with interesting people every week. Breaking Progressives, spending time every week breaking down left-wing narratives and showing what's real and what's fake. Economics Why Not? A weekly look at economics and applying economic principles to daily life. Better Today, a weekly podcast where we take a look on ways to improve your life and be better today. Libertarian Comments is a podcast where we play audio from the video archives of Alex Merced from his videos dating back to 2008. Liberty Public Access, a podcast where anyone can submit an episode. Submit your episodes to Alex Merced at alexmerced.com. Have you been wanting to start your own podcast? Then subscribe to Podcast and Blogging Tips and Tricks, a weekly podcast about how to host your podcast, how to produce your podcast, and how to market your podcast. We'll be adding some monthly podcasts to the lineup soon, including Make Markets Free Again, a monthly look at what's going on in markets and regulation all over the world, and the Free VST podcast, looking at free VST instruments for electronic music producers. Listen to these podcasts by going to libertarianwingmedia.com or subscribing on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. And if you enjoy the podcast, tell your friends and leave a positive review on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.
Folks, welcome back. We're just going to use this final segment to kind of tie up loose ends and come to a gentle landing so that we all kind of, you know, can catch our bearings and understand where we are with this topic. And, you know, to kind of turn the direction a little bit, back in May, it was actually one of your critiques of Gary Johnson for Conservative Review that, you know, after reading it and after taking it in for a couple weeks, I eventually was like, I can't support this guy. I mean, Gary Johnson is a progressive by another name. So there you go. You changed my mind on him. And even though we came to two different conclusions for what we were going to do on election day, I definitely credit you to that. The biggest thing that we keep bringing up is that, moderate Democrats, they're essentially gone, at least for the federal level at this point. And the Republicans, they still need, they still need to have their butts put to the fire every once in a while. While we do have some phenomenal Republicans in federal office right now, it seems that a whole bunch of them are just waiting for the next set of directions because they don't necessarily have the drive themselves. So speaking of Gary Johnson, he's gone. He's probably getting high on Mount Everest or something, and I don't even know where Bill Weld is.
You mean marijuana entrepreneur Gary Johnson?
Oh, he couldn't sell weed to hippies. He's no marijuana entrepreneur.
No, he is. He owns a marijuana company.
He still owns that? Oh,
yeah, he never got rid of that. He still owns his marijuana company.
Well, let's not give him another second. Anyway, libertarians. I've talked to a couple people. I talked to the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Northern Virginia. I've got another person from the new Federalist Party coming on. We saw that no one's talking about it now because third parties and voting third party, it's not sexy right now. It's not one of the talking points. It essentially, people stopped talking about it in November. But since now we have, people will still remember that, and we have Republicans who own, they're in control of this ship for now. Do you think we're going to see any type of third party threat at all, or is that essentially dead and we're just going to have to try and get the Republicans that do what they're supposed to do?
Well, it's tough in this system because we have campaign finance laws and the two parties that control the country make it tough for third parties to start by making it very difficult for them to raise money in field candidates. I think you'll see it be tough. I think what you'll continue to see is a stronger liberty movement grow within the Republican Party. People like the House Freedom Caucus, the Thomas Masseys, the Justin Amash's of the world, the congressman that you mentioned earlier, Jim Jordan, those kind of guys. I think you'll see a lot more of them, Dave Bratt, step up. But it's going to be it's very tough because of the campaign finance laws to start a third party and allow it to grow, and especially at the state level. You can't have party support, so the candidates are on their own and have small donation limits because there's no real party that can actually form to raise money to help them because they haven't met certain goals. And it's what the two major parties have done to stop, with campaign finance laws to keep their duopoly on the governing system. So it is going to be tough. I know, I know some of the guys that we're talking, you're going to have the Federalist Party on, some of the guys that we're talking about doing that before the election. It's going to be interesting. I think if Donald Trump hadn't won, I think you may have actually seen some Republicans jump ship, elected Republicans in the Congress jump ship to start a third party. But with Donald Trump winning, I don't think you're going to see that anymore.
Yeah, I get kind of the same vibe with things. And I'm glad you bring up the House Freedom Caucus. We have, I think now, and this is going to be a while, after this took place, but just the liberty movement is alive and well, and now is the time for it to thrive. How often are we ever going to get to see Ted Cruz completely wipe the floor with Bernie Sanders, for example, and bring up free market solutions and individual freedom? Now is the time for Republicans to lead that. But I am curious about this. Way back in the beginning of the episode, I brought up, Buckley's three-legged conservative stool. I won't bring up those examples, but it seems that, we've had kind of a shift in the GOP. Obviously, the liberty movement is still there. Right now, I'd like to say that the neocons are kind of on the run. But I think, and I don't often say this, it actually surprises me that I'm saying this, but I tend to agree with Bill Maher on this. I don't think that the evangelical wing of the Republican Party, I don't think it's the way it was and will ever be again. Do you think that the shift we've seen because of the quote, the populist surge that Stephen Moore called it, do you think that overall the Republican Party as a whole, in terms of the different conservative factions, is in a better direction or a worse direction?
I think we'll still have to see, populism isn't necessarily conservatism. So, we'll have to see where it goes. But, Donald Trump has laid out, some strong conservative principles and some principles that aren't conservative. But if he continues to follow through on those conservative principles, I think you'll be fine. I mean, look at the Betsy DeVos thing. Now, my colleague Michelle Malkin has problems with Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, because of her support for Common Core in the past. And, she doesn't know if she'll continue to do it. But the liberal response to her was completely unhinged. And you need to see, why was that? You have to ask your question, why were they so unhinged with Betsy DeVos? Well, one of the things Betsy DeVos wants to do is give everybody a voucher, have the dollars follow the student, so every child can go to the school of his or her choice or his or her parent's choice, regardless of sectarianism, of whether it's a public school, a charter school, a private school. The dollars follow the student and they get a voucher. Well, what that does is that stops the teachers' unions, because a lot of those schools don't have teachers' unions. And what do the teachers' unions do? The teachers' unions are one of the largest contributors to the Democratic and progressive machine. So that fight against Betsy DeVos wasn't about the education of children. It was about keeping the money train going so that the Democrats and the progressives could keep power.
Definitely. Sir, we've got to wrap things up. And I mean, on the school choice thing, I bet you and I can go on that all day long. I mean, that's something I'm so excited about, because I agree with Ted Cruz 110%. School choice is the civil rights issue of our generation. And hopefully we can talk about that again in the future. But, sir, if people want to link up with you online, see more of your work, and keep up with everything that's going on in your world, how can they do so?
Conservative Review, I've got a Facebook page, Rob Eno Columnist. If you type that in, I think that's where you. So it's facebook.com/Rob Eno Columnist. And then @Rob Eno is my Twitter handle.
Perfect. Sir, thank you so much for coming on the program. I learned a lot and had a good time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, it's time to get your hands dirty. When you need to call someone out, do it gently at first. And then when they ignore you, you get loud. And when it comes to the Republicans, we will probably never get an opportunity like this again. So let's take advantage of it. Now, what's one thing you could do to keep things going? Well, I don't know, but you could subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, Player FM,
and the Self-Defense Radio Network.
We're everywhere, and if you can't find the platform that suits your lifestyle, go ahead and check us out, remsorepublic.com/podcast, and check out the Networker app of your choice. As always, be good to your neighbor, be kind, treat yourself, be awesome. Good night, America.
Stay connected to Liberty's Rabble Rouser on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with the latest episodes, blogs, and other available content. What are you waiting for?